I still remember the sound that morning, the crunch of gravel, the roar of tires, and then that sickening snap. My private property sign lay split clean in half dust, rising behind a shiny white SUV with an HOA logo plastered on the door. Behind the wheel sat Claire Phillips, the self-declared queen of Whispering Pines, driving across my land like she owned the whole county. She didn't even slow down, just gave me that smug little wave through her tinted window, the kind that says, "You can't stop me." And right then something inside me cracked louder than that signpost. 15 years of hard work bulldozing this dirt road by hand, protecting every inch of my ranch gone under her tires like it was nothing. That was the exact moment I stopped being polite. If Claire wanted a shortcut across my land, then I was going to give her one. Straight down. Before we dig into this wild HOA story, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city and local time in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss how this showdown ends. If you've ever lived on a piece of land long enough, you start to feel every inch of it like it's part of your own skin. For me, that dirt road running from the highway down to my barn wasn't just a path, it was history. I'd spent 15 years keeping it alive. When the summer storms washed it out, I was the one out there at dawn with my old grader scraping, leveling, patching it up so the feed truck could make it through. That road was my artery, my pride, my peace. And for 15 years, not a soul disturbed it. Then she arrived. The new HOA subdivision popped up over the creek last year, one of those modern luxury communities that looks like somebody photocopied the same beige box 100 times and called it Progress. They named it Whispering Pines. I swear to God, there isn't a single pine tree within 3 miles. But that didn't stop people from paying good money to live there, and didn't stop Claire Phillips from making herself the self-appointed sheriff of suburban order. At first, I barely noticed her. I'd see the occasional car on the far ridge, maybe a golf cart wandering too close to my fence. But one morning there, it was a fresh set of tire tracks running right through the middle of my dirt road. I followed them down the stretch, and they ended where my property line met the HOA's back gate. I told myself it was a one-time mistake. Maybe some new resident got lost trying to find the main exit. Happens all the time. I even chuckled about it. But then it happened and again, and again. Every morning around 7:30 like clockwork, a white SUV with chrome trim would appear from the HOA side, kicking up a cloud of dust as it barreled straight across my road. Sometimes she'd slow down just enough to flash that fake friendly wave. Most days she didn't even bother. She'd blast music loud enough to spook the cattle roll through the intersection and disappear into the highway like she owned it. At first I just stood there, bucket of feed and hand mouth open, watching her. You know that feeling when you can't believe someone's actually doing what you're seeing. It's like watching a squirrel rob a bird feeder in broad daylight, staring you right in the eyes while it does it. That's exactly what it felt like. So I did what any reasonable man would do. I put up a sign, big bold letters, private road, no trespassing. I planted it right in the middle of the curve, where she always passed through. Clean, simple, impossible to miss. The next morning the SUV rolled through again, and the sign was gone. I found it a few hours later, snapped clean in half, hidden behind my hay bales like a trophy. That's when I realized this wasn't ignorance. It was arrogance. That night, I was sitting on my porch watching the sun bleed out over the hills, and I saw the headlights again, bouncing, cutting across the field like 2 angry eyes. She didn't even slow down for the ruts, just sailed through a dust trail glittering in her wake. The next morning I decided to stop her. I parked my truck across the road near the bend and waited. Sure enough, 7:02 a.m., there she was. I waved both hands to get her attention. She slowed down, rolled the window halfway, and gave me that practiced smile the kind politicians use when they're about to lie to your face. "Morning, Mr. Rogers, is it?" she said. "Everything okay?" "Not really," I told her. "You're driving on private property. This road isn't public, it's mine." She tilted her head like I'd just told her the sky was green. "Oh, come on now. We're all neighbors, aren't we? What's a little dirt between friends?" That sentence burned into my brain. What's a little dirt between friends? I stood there speechless for a moment, trying to decide whether to laugh or yell. I managed neither. I just said, "Ma'am, this isn't a shortcut. It's a working ranch road. Please stop using it." She smiled wider. "Well, I'll see what the board says." And with that, she drove off, tires spinning, dust flying straight into my face. The board, as she called it, turned out to be the HOA council, a handful of retirees with clipboards and too much free time, all living under Claire's thumb. Over the next week, I noticed more of them showing up, stopping near my fence, pointing, whispering, measuring distances like they were planning an invasion. A few days later, I came home from the feed store to find something that made my blood run cold. Right at the mouth of my road stood Claire and 3 HOA members holding papers and sipping iced lattes like they were hosting a picnic. I slowed my truck, rolled down the window, and said, "Can I help you folks?" Claire smiled, that same porcelain smile. "Oh, Brandon, hi, we're just holding a quick community vote. The board decided it would be mutually beneficial to open your access road for neighborhood convenience. We're calling it a shared easement proposal." I laughed. I couldn't help it. I thought it was a joke. But then I saw her clipboard signatures, bullet points, HOA letterhead. That laughter turned to something else entirely. That night after I'd fed the horses and closed the barn, I walked to my mailbox. Inside was a letter, no county seal, no lawyer's mark. Just an HOA logo at the top printed in Comic Sans, for crying out loud. "Dear Mr. Rogers," it read, "the HOA board has officially voted to incorporate your ranch road as part of the Whispering Pines community travel access. Any resistance or obstruction will be treated as non-compliance with community guidelines. Cooperation is expected. Thank you for your understanding." It was signed, "Sincerely, Claire Phillips, President, Whispering Pines HOA," with a smiley face drawn next to her name, a smiley face. I sat there on the porch, letter in one hand, beer in the other, staring at that stretch of dirt road glowing under the moonlight. I could hear the crickets, the distant moo of a cow, and somewhere far off the faint hum of an HOA SUV idling like a threat. That's when it hit me. Claire didn't just want convenience, she wanted control. See, folks like her don't see land the way people like me do. To her, it's not soil or sweat, it's lines on a map she thinks she can redraw with enough votes and a confident tone. Well, I wasn't raised to bow to that. By the time I finished that beer, I'd made up my mind. No more warnings, no more signs, no more polite chats. If she wanted a shortcut through my life, I was about to give her one she'd never forget. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called Derek Miller, my oldest friend, and the only man I knew who owned a backhoe and an unlimited sense of humor. When he answered, all I said was, "Derek, you ever feel like teaching karma how to dig?" There was a pause, then his deep laugh crackled through the line. "Brandon," he said, "tell me when and how deep." And just like that, the seed of my revenge was planted. I looked out over the land again, the long, winding road that had carried me through every season, every storm, every bit of blood and sweat. It wasn't just dirt, it was mine. And if I had to dig a hole to remind someone of that, then so be it. There's a special kind of silence that comes before a storm, the kind that hums in your bones, warning you that something stupid is about to happen. For me, that silence came 2 days after the Comic Sans letter showed up. It was a Friday morning, and I was patching the fence near the creek when I heard voices, dozens of them, drifting across the wind. When I looked up, I saw a group of people standing right on my land, folding chairs, clipboards, balloons. At first, I thought maybe they were filming one of those overly cheerful HOA promotional videos, Whispering Pines where community thrives. But then I spotted Claire Phillips standing in the center like a general before battle, wearing a pink blazer and holding a megaphone. I wiped the sweat off my brow and muttered, "Oh, this ought to be good." As I got closer, I saw a folding table with a banner hanging across it. Community Access Vote, Making Progress Together. There were coffee cups, printed forms, and even a little donation jar labeled, "Help Pave Our Future, Morning." Brandon, Claire chirped as I approached. "Perfect timing, we're just about to start the vote." "The vote?" I asked, looking around. "On what exactly?" She smiled sweetly as if she were explaining something to a slow child. "On integrating your road as a shared access point. We're all neighbors here, and the HOA board believes community connectivity is essential for harmony." "Claire," I said slowly, "you're standing on private land." "Oh, don't be silly," she laughed. "The board already agreed this portion is part of the common easement. We're just finalizing it democratically." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A democratic vote to take my road. "You can't just vote on someone else's property," I said, half laughing, half fuming. She gave me that syrupy tone again. "Well, actually, Brandon, the HOA charter allows us to make recommendations that align with community needs. Once we file the motion with the county, it's just a matter of formality." "Formality," I repeated, staring at her like she'd grown a second head. "You think you can just declare ownership because it's convenient?" "Not ownership," she corrected, tapping her clipboard. "Integration." Behind her, a few HOA members nodded solemnly, sipping their coffees like they were witnessing a spiritual ceremony. That's when I knew Claire wasn't just delusional. She was dangerous. I told her plainly, "If you or anyone else sets foot on this road again without my say-so, you'll be trespassing, and the sheriff will hear about it." She smiled as if I'd complimented her outfit. "Oh, Brandon, you really should relax more. You're letting negativity cloud your energy." I took a deep breath and pointed toward the banner. "Take this circus off my property before I do it for you." There was a tense silence. the kind that hangs between lightning and thunder. Then she said softly, "You'll regret not cooperating with the community." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind that comes from someone who's just realized they're living next to a lunatic. That night, the letter came. This one wasn't just printed on Comic Sans. It was color-coded, laminated, and signed, with Claire's flourish and her little signature smiley face. Dear Mr. Rogers, the HOA Board of Whispering Pines has officially voted to integrate your private road into community use. Resistance will be considered a violation of regional community standards and may result in fines and legal action. Cooperation is expected and appreciated. Warmest regards, Claire Phillips, President Whispering Pines HOA. I couldn't decide what was worse, the delusion or the stationary choice. I crumpled it, then thought better, and smoothed it out again. Evidence, I reminded myself. You keep every piece of crazy. After that night, something shifted inside me. The part of me that used to believe in polite conversations and civil compromise, it died quietly, buried right there under the weight of that laminated letter. I started noticing everything. The HOA patrol cars driving by my fence just to monitor boundaries. The landscaper drones hovering too close to my property line. Even one of their so-called safety volunteers, jogging past with a GoPro strapped to his chest. They were watching me, testing me, waiting to see how far they could push. But they didn't know that I'd already made up my mind. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about principle. If someone could take your property just by voting loud enough, what was the point of owning anything at all? That night, I called Derek Miller again. He was half asleep when he answered. "Tell me you didn't buy another cow," he mumbled. "No cows," I said, "but I've got a pest problem. Coyotes again, worse," I told him, "the kind that drive SUVs and file community motions." He was silent for a moment, then snorted. "Oh, you mean HOA varmints?" "Exactly. What's the plan?" I looked out the window at the moonlight glinting off the dusty road. Something educational, something humbling. The next morning, Derek showed up in his old Ford truck, a thermos of coffee in one hand and a grin that said, "This is going to be fun." "All right," he said, hopping out. "Tell me where you want the lesson dug." We walked the length of the road, studying the curves and slopes like two men planning a sculpture instead of revenge. Finally, I pointed to a spot halfway down the trail, right after a blind bend where the hill dipped slightly. "There," I said. "She hits that stretch doing at least 30. She'll never see it coming." Derek nodded approvingly. "How deep you thinking deep enough for reflection?" I said. He chuckled. "Got it. Philosophical trench. My specialty." We spent the rest of the day hauling out the old backhoe from his shed, greasing the joints, checking the hydraulics. The machine roared to life like a dragon awakening. By sundown, we had the first outline marked. The earth was dry, the air electric, with that scent of dust and heat that only Texas summers can make. Every scoop of dirt that came up felt like reclaiming a piece of pride I'd lost to Claire's tires. "Think she'll notice?" Derek asked, as the trench deepened. "Not until she's in it." We both laughed, the sound bouncing off the hills. We didn't stop until the moon rose high, pale, and perfect over the horizon. By then, the trench was 3 feet wide, nearly 4 deep enough to catch a heavy SUV, but not deep enough to do real harm. Just enough to make a point. We covered it carefully with old plywood, packed dirt over it, and scattered loose twigs and grass to make it look natural. From a distance, it was flawless, just another patch of country road. We stood there afterward, leaning on the backhoe, sipping cold beers and staring at our handiwork. "Looks like a work of art," Derek said proudly. "Modern rural installation," I agreed. "Tidal consequences of entitlement." He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his beer. Before heading home, we set up 2 trail cameras hidden in the brush just in case karma decided to perform on schedule. As I walked back to the house, the night air felt cooler, lighter. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't angry. I was calm, peaceful even. See, revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's quiet, precise, beautiful. The next day I woke before sunrise, brewed a pot of strong black coffee, and pulled a couple of folding lawn chairs out by the barn. Derek showed up a few minutes later, donuts in hand, grin wide as ever. "You think today's the day?" he asked. "Oh, it's Friday," I said. "And Claire Phillips doesn't miss her Friday yoga class." We settled in behind a line of hay bales, cameras rolling, waiting. The sun crept higher, burning gold across the fields. The cows grazed. The wind was still. The world for once felt balanced, like nature itself was holding its breath. Then, in the distance, we heard it. That familiar roar of tires, the faint thump of bass, and the high-pitched voice of a woman yelling affirmations to a podcast host about manifesting her power. Claire Phillips was on her way. The sound of that SUV grew louder with every passing second, a deep mechanical growl mixed with pop music and entitlement. I swear I could almost smell the perfume and arrogance coming before I even saw the car. Derek nudged me from behind the hay bales, whispering, "Here comes the Queen of Asphalt." Through the shimmering heat waves, Claire's white HOA-issued SUV appeared over the hill sunlight, flashing off its chrome like a beacon of self-righteousness. She was right on schedule, yoga mat in the passenger seat, iced latte in the cup holder, sunglasses big enough to cover half her face. $10 says she's on speakerphone, Derek muttered. Make it 20, I said. And she's bragging. Sure enough, as she approached the curve, we heard her voice shouting into the phone about setting boundaries with people who don't understand community cooperation. The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. The SUV hit the bend fast, too fast. She didn't slow down, not even for a second. The front tires rolled onto the plywood, the faintest creak echoing across the still air. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for. Crack. It was like thunder ripping through the valley. The plywood gave way beneath the weight of her 2-ton Suburban tank, and in an instant the front end plunged straight down. The SUV nosedived into the trench headlights, disappearing, the back tires lifting off the ground before slamming down again. A puff of dust and airbag powder exploded through the open driver's window. Claire's scream cut through the air, a high-pitched wail somewhere between shock and denial. The car's horn blared once, then died. Derek nearly fell off his chair laughing. I had to slap a hand over my mouth to keep quiet. From where we sat, the whole thing looked like a scene out of an action movie in slow motion, the world holding its breath as karma made its grand entrance. For a few glorious seconds, Claire just sat there, stunned, covered in airbag dust, frozen like a statue of poetic justice. Then, with a loud click, her door flew open. She stumbled out, clutching her phone like it was a weapon, screaming into the air. "Sabotage, you've put my life in danger. This is a criminal act." I nearly lost it when she tripped over her own yoga mat and dropped her iced latte into the trench. The splash of cold coffee across her shiny SUV was the final touch on the masterpiece. Derek whispered, "You think she's going to call the cops? She already has," I said, pointing. Claire was on the phone, pacing furiously, throwing her free hand in the air like she was conducting an invisible orchestra of outrage. Within 15 minutes, a county sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Sure enough, Sheriff Cole Matthews stepped out, a tall man in his late 50s, with a face permanently carved into "I've seen worse." He walked over, adjusting his hat, scanning the scene. "Morning, ma'am," he said slowly. "Everything all right here?" "All right," Claire shouted. "Do I look all right?" "This man set a trap. A trap. My car is destroyed. I could have died." Sheriff Cole looked at the trench, at the SUV, then at me and Derek standing behind our hay bales, trying to look innocent. He sighed, the kind of long, heavy sigh that only lawmen and parents of teenagers know. "Mr. Rogers," he said calmly, "you want to explain what's going on here?" I nodded. "Sure do, Sheriff." "That right there," I said, pointing at the trench, "is a soil erosion project. Been planning it for weeks. This here's private property, and she's been trespassing every day for months." Claire gasped like I'd accused her of witchcraft. "Erosion project. Don't insult my intelligence." "This was intentional. You can't just dig holes on a public road." Sheriff Cole raised an eyebrow. "Public road," he turned to me. "That true? No, sir," I said, pulling a folded county map from my back pocket, already laminated just in case. "Here's my property line. The road's been mine since 2009. Deeds on file at the clerk's office." Cole studied it, tracing the red boundary line with his finger. Then he looked at Claire. "Ma'am, this here's Rogers' land. You don't have legal access through it." Claire's jaw dropped. "That's ridiculous. We're all part of the same community." Cole nodded slowly. "Except he's not in your HOA. And unless your community charter overrules county property law, which I doubt, this road ain't yours." Derek snorted behind me. I elbowed him before he could say something stupid. Claire turned bright red, waving her phone around. "I demand an investigation. This is a violation of safety standards. He endangered me, my vehicle, and the integrity of the neighborhood." Cole pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, I'll file a report if you want. But from where I'm standing, it looks like you drove into an active work site that didn't belong to you. You're taking his side, I'm taking the law's side," he said firmly. There was a long silence. Then, in the calmest tone imaginable, Cole said, "You might want to call a tow truck." Claire looked like she might explode. "Oh, I will." "And you haven't heard the last of this, Sheriff?" He nodded.